Ruz, when it comes to taxation, does the Sharia have the same rules or does it have restrictive rules?
No, I don't think it's necessarily that there's a Sharia-compliant tax planning options and none. I wouldn't say necessarily that. I think it's just how Muslims interact with tax. Our version of tax planning was don't tell them, which is completely not right. And we've jumped to an extreme when actually there's so much that can be done in between. And I think on what we've discussed around generational wealth and growing wealth, I think we focus on just working hard to grow it rather than working smart. Because the smart then is that nuance of being able to carve out, okay, what are the right things to do here? Simple things that can be done that can, just compound and help you grow much quicker. But I think that's something as a community we definitely need to be better at, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to come to Abul shortly because I was going to, inshallah, speak to us about growth. But I was saying earlier that, growth isn't necessarily in our hands. You can't guarantee the growth, but you can control expenditure and you can control how much you spend on something, and actually taking a smart or a prudent approach to taxation planning helps you.
Yeah, saving or cutting costs doesn't have to be something very hard. Eating just noodles or eating roti all the time, basically. It's like, you can do things much better. It's just knowing the rules, speaking to people. I think as a community, actually, I think we're still very insular. We don't speak openly about our wealth. We don't even disclose it to our family, what's going on. And because we're still very insular, not talking about wealth, we don't go out and get advice. So we're actually doing a disservice to our own community, our own family, by not going out and getting the right advice. Yeah. It's something that we need to get more comfortable doing, for sure.
Yeah, I remember talking to my dad once about his own affairs, and he was like, "Oh, shut up! You won't understand." I'm like, "Okay, you're talking to a guy who aristocrats and celebrities come and pay serious money to get advice from me, but I won't understand your affairs, Dad." So it is definitely a taboo subject between generations.
And from your own experience, I mean, dealing with lots of these high net worths and people have, considerable amounts of wealth. How does your experience with them change, or how has it changed from dealing with them and the financial products they have open to themselves to now?
Yeah, so look, in the conventional space, private banking and things like that, you've got the money, you can do anything you like. Now, alhamdulillah, last 7 years working at Wahed, it's opened my eyes to the fact that actually from a Sharia perspective, there's a lot of things that Muslims shouldn't participate in. Things such as bonds, interest-paying bonds and things like that. In the conventional space, there's a lot of financial advisors out there. Muslims go to wealth managers and things like that because it's a trusted name and things like that. And they'll go to them and they say, "Look, I don't have a Sharia option for you, but I've got ethical." And, ethically, they seem, well, actually, it sounds about right. And that's a happy, nice medium for me. But the reality is, things which the conventional will deem to be ethical, we still deem to be unethical, right? There's a lot of talk, and Umar, you've done a lot of this work with the UN in terms of green bonds and stuff like that, right? Now, these are offsetting carbon and all of this kind of stuff. Sounds great, but the reality is they're still interest bearing, and it's still huge amounts of debt laden on a deprived country in the first place, right? So it's these kind of things that as Muslims we can't participate in, and we shouldn't do, right? Yeah. Because obviously riba is the only thing within our deen that we're waging a war with Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When it comes to using it, everything else, it's prohibited, but it's not described in that same way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so do we have a large universe of investments available to us?
Yes and no. Yes, alhamdulillah, the Sharia allows for us to start participating in things which otherwise, in the past used to be prohibitive. But with certain conditions attached to it, things such as when you're talking about bonds, obviously as Muslims, we can't invest into those things. They're unsecured debt, they pay interest. It's unpermissible. Then we look at stocks, but again, stocks, as long as they're within certain thresholds, for example, debt to equity or impermissible income, and also the industries that these stock companies operate in, these kind of things are the conditions then which will determine whether Muslims, as Muslims, we can participate, we can invest into them.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking, actually, the kind of the Muslim community experience, and it's different. We're not a homogenous community anymore. I guess a lot of the early generation probably came from the Indian subcontinent, and often as laborers, or as economic social migrants, and they worked hard. They kind of saved money, and they kind of created a good life for us. And our generation went on to be professionals, as we've seen, and it's a different landscape now, but kind of that historical baggage of how money was kind of saved, and it was often put in gold and real estate, right?
Yeah.
These are the two, gold and real estate. But now we're working and we have less disposable cash, I would say, versus our parents' generation, for a number of reasons. And I guess we can touch upon inflation and just the cost of living now. And people, they still have the mentality of kind of, look, do what you can to save money now. And often it damages them long term. I'm sure you can maybe give us some examples, Riz, of when it comes to tax planning. Surely we should try and save as much money as we can now, though, right?